Hey, good morning. I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm excited to talk to you today about a lot of different things, but maybe the biggest thing is our new game, Finspan. Finspan is a wingspan game, as we say on the box, but this is a aquatic themed version of Wingspan with a bunch of new mechanisms, but it does have a familiar structure to Wingspan itself. On tomorrow's design diary post, I'll go into all the things that are unique and new about Finspan. But if you're familiar with Wingspan, I think you'll find some key similarities as well in Finspan. Already in the comments, I see one comment. Someone asked if this is the first game that I'm not the developer of. I'm the developer of all Stonemaier games. But Elizabeth Hargrave is very kind to add her development expertise about the Wingspan world to both Wormspan and Finspan. So she is kind of an additional developer there. But by default, I'm the developer. I work on all of our games quite a bit. Austin says, I'm curious if an upgraded component pack will be available alongside Finspan, similar to Wormspan. It will. Yeah, we'll have basically two Finspan products. We don't have rubber playmats for Finspan. Instead, we just have the core game itself. I'll just leave this right here so you can see it. And we have an upgraded component pack as well. All of this stuff. So we're announcing it today. Today is January 8th. Finspan will launch on the Stonemaier Games web store on January 22nd, so in 2 weeks, and it will be ready to ship, I believe, to all regions at that point. We should have received it at all of our fulfillment centers by then, and then the retail launch will be about a month later. Brick and mortar first, then online stores. Let's see. Sorry if I missed any questions that were posted before I went live. Let's see. Jonathan says, I wonder where Finspan lands in terms of weight compared to Wingspan and Wormspan. So we designed Wormspan to be a little bit more complex than Wingspan, and we designed Finspan to be a little bit less complex than Wingspan. They're still pretty close. You can tell if you played Wormspan, you can tell that it's a little bit more complex, but not that much more complex. Finspan is similar. It's a little bit less complex than Wingspan, but not too much less. Yeah. I'm happy to answer any questions about the game today. So the information we have about it here. I'll show you my other screen. Here is the announcement newsletter that I just sent out. The link to this is in the comments in case you don't subscribe to it, or in the description of the video. So designers David Gornid, Michael O'Connell, they did a wonderful job creating Finspan, and the artist Anna, who works on Wingspan. Anna's sister Catalina worked on it, and we brought in also Mesa Shoemaker because Anna is very busy with Wingspan work. And Natalia did a few illustrations in Finspan. Natalia is one of the main artists for Wingspan, but she mainly is focusing on Wingspan. There's a bunch of information about the game here. There's a comment from Elizabeth Hargrave and some information about when Finspan is launching. There's a trailer that you can watch, a teaser trailer video that's on the YouTube channel now, the Stonemaier Games YouTube channel. It's also on our website if you want to check that out. And both on Instagram and our website and here, there's an infographic that talks about how Finspan works. One of the key elements of Finspan is that you are diving down. And unlike Wingspan and Wormspan, you are not restricted to how far you can dive. In fact, every time you dive down, you dive all the way down. And that means that you can encounter fish in different orders. The fish, unlike Wingspan and Wormspan, you don't stop at when you reach the last fish in the row. You can place fish anywhere based on their placement restrictions. Different fish live in different depths of oceans, lakes, rivers, different bodies of water. And so you can dive all the way down. And there's even a bonus at the bottom of each dive site, the first time each round that you dive down to the bottom of that dive site, to kind of incentivize you to diversify your actions in every round of the game. It's a neat mechanism in my opinion. Let's see. Nathan says, is Finspan codename Crow? Yeah, our website has been a little overloaded today, this morning. So I haven't been able to update the progress chart from codename Crow to Finspan. I pick 4-letter words for Finspan, or for our code names, and codename Crow came because it's kind of a nod to Wingspan. It's a 4-letter bird that is a very popular bird in Wingspan, and I wanted to kind of wink at Wingspan, given that this is a World of Wingspan game. Carlos says, how did you choose the designers for Finspan? That's a good question, Carlos. Michael and David, they have been connected to Stonemaier Games for a while. for various reasons. And once we started talking internally about what Finspan could be and what it needed to be, really is maybe the better way to put it. I talked to both of them. Michael had designed something for fun that was somewhat related to Wingspan. It was kind of a version of Wingspan that didn't use text, making it kind of more icon driven, so it could be friendlier to slightly younger audiences who couldn't fully read the more complex text or didn't want to read the more complex text in Finspan and Wormspan eventually. And David showed a high interest in it as well while we were talking about that with Michael. So yeah, they became involved as the designers in that way, and I think did a wonderful job with the game. I think it's tough when you take an existing property like Wingspan and you want to make it into something that is familiar but also different. And they were really up to that challenge, especially they leaned so heavily into this theme, both in terms of how I mentioned, like how the player mat works, how the individual fish work and how their unique abilities work. And also there's a whole system of tokens in Finspan where the fish are laying eggs, which is kind of like Wingspan, but then the eggs hatch into young. They turn into something else. And those young can actually move around and they can be grouped together. Once you have 3 young in one place, they become a school of fish, which is a token that is worth more points at the end of the game. So a lot of token systems in subsystems in Finspan. Let's see. Garrett says, do I have a favorite fish or two from the deck? I do have a bunch of favorite fish. I don't know if I have a clear... Well, I actually really love the flying fish itself. There are 2 different flying fish that are in Finspan. They might be 2 of my favorites. Just aesthetically, I think they look really cool. And I love the connection to Wingspan because of the flying fish. LB Jeeper says, is there a key mechanical difference that you can call out? There are a bunch of them. I've talked about, I'm probably behind on comments a few minutes here, but you've probably heard me talk about over the last few minutes, a few of those differences. And there are others too. What's another one that I can mention here? I have a full list that is coming out tomorrow. One of the biggest differences in Finspan, and I'll show you some cards from the game so you can see what I'm talking about, is that the core cost for most of the cards is another card. Sometimes they cost other tokens, but oftentimes they cost cards from your hand. Here's one that actually consumes cards. This one costs eggs. Here's one. The puffer costs 2 cards. So you are discarding cards from your hand to pay for most of the cards in the game, but those cards go into a personal discard pile. This we found prevents the loss aversion of giving up something that you really want that you might want to play later. They go into a personal discard pile, and there's an ability in the game where you can recover cards from your personal discard pile. So you're paying cards, and every now and then you get to recover one of those cards if you really want that card back in your hand. Chad says, was it hard to keep my cat Walter from trying to eat the components for Finspan? Walter took some interest in one of the deluxe tokens, that I'll show you a little bit later. But for the most part, he's stayed away from the game. He's been a good boy about that. So I guess I'll talk about the upgrade pack. Ross asked about it here. A few people have asked about it. So the game, I mentioned, the game comes with a bunch of tokens. Here's what the tokens look like. Here, I'll show you. The game includes this tray. In fact, we created a new tray just for Finspan that has the cards on 2 sides and the tokens in the middle. These are cardboard tokens. These tokens, if you get the deluxe pack, are replaced by these tokens. So they're wooden versions of schools, young, and these are eggs. They're in a separate bag because they're kind of the squishy eggs. And they do have a flat side, a slightly flat side, so they don't completely roll around. But yeah, this is what the upgraded components look like in Finspan. All one pack there. George says, any differences in terms of solo mode mechanisms, and will it still be Automa Factory? It is still Automa Factory. You can see it right here on the box right there. And we'll go, I specialize a lot more in the multiplayer stuff, but we'll go into, we have a design diary coming out next week about the Automa Factory mode. It is its own unique mode designed specifically for Finspan. Josh says, future expansions of fish from different areas of the world, similar to Wingspan. Right now, we're just focusing on the core game. We haven't released the core game yet, so we're not going to really talk about expansions yet. But I will say that we selected fish for Finspan from fish around the world. We kind of took we I've been trying to say not to say we cast a wide net, because this is not a game about catching fish. But we looked at fish from around the world of different depths, of different types of water, bodies of water. And so unlike Wingspan, we did not say, okay, we're only doing fish from this continent for the core game. We took fish from around the world, both unique and popular fish. If we make expansions for Finspan, and we do hope to do that, we'll probably focus them on specific types of categories. Like we might do, I don't know, freshwater fish. We might do a sharks expansion. Even though there are some sharks included in the game, we might go deeper into different types of fish and aquatic life in expansions. Let's see. Seven Castles Game says, I would like to ask if you ever had to sacrifice some components due to the cost or changes of rules for that reason. Definitely. I mean, it's always, in my opinion, a value proposition decision when we're deciding how much do we think, how much do we want to charge for the game based on what we're including in the box. And sometimes that means, yeah, we remove certain components, not remove them, but maybe change the composition of certain components so that the game can be the right price for the game. And then oftentimes if those components are really, really cool, then we will offer them separately. For Finspan, the plan was never to include the upgraded pack components in the game because the cardboard components work just fine. They were perfectly fine. They look good on the player mat. But so they're a good add-on. But yeah, definitely, we've had to make that decision many times. Carol says, when you get through the Finspan news, have you already played more 2024 games since filming your top 10 video? Any new standouts or ones that you think you'll get to soon? Carol, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I have some subtopics today, although Finspan is the main topic. I have the main game that I played so far this year. I've played Finspan, I've played Wormspan, and I've played 2.5 games of Ark Nova. We still have another game to play. So no, I have not played any of the games that I plan to play or that I hope to play from 2024 that I didn't get to. But I am attending Geekway Mini, a little mini convention coming up soon in St. Louis. I'm hoping to play some games there. But as Carol mentioned, I did post my top 10 list from 2024. It's on YouTube, on the Stonemaier Games YouTube channel, in case you're curious about that list. Ian says, is Walter the catfish in the game? Walter is not the catfish, but Walter does appear in Finspan. Walter is my cat. And actually, real quick mention, an artist was so kind to send me, just yesterday I received this, a beautiful picture, a beautiful illustration of Biddy the other day. Biddy is my late cat who passed away about 1.5 years ago. This really, really touched me. So thank you to Hiromi for creating this beautiful illustration of Biddy. I really, really appreciate that. Chad says, is this focusing on ocean fish or freshwater mixed in? Is the core box regulated to one region on Earth? Sorry, I'm behind a little bit on questions, but I mentioned a second ago, the fish are from around the world, and they are from all different types of bodies of water. Matt says, how long ago did you guys start working on Finspan? Was it before or after Wormspan? We kind of made the decision to start working on Finspan around the same time as Wormspan, but it got off the ground a little bit slower than Wormspan. So I think it was around maybe around 3 years ago. That seems about right at this point. Austin says, were there any species for Finspan pulled from anywhere in particular, freshwater, ocean, all over the world? Yeah, does it include any endangered or extinct species? No extinct species, but some endangered species. Yes. Aaron says, when was it decided to release these Wingspan sequels in back-to-back years? It wasn't really a plan. The release schedule wasn't a plan. It was more like the games are ready now. Wormspan was ready, so we released it. When Finspan was ready, we released it. So it wasn't really a plan in that way. It's just when our products are ready, then we release them. There are sharks in the game. Nito BGG says, are there sharks in the game? There are at least a couple sharks in the game, but there are also some sharks that aren't in the game. That's why I mentioned that maybe someday we'll do a deeper dive into sharks in a little modular expansion. Let's do it. Ask for the game price. We don't release the game price until the launch day. So you will see the game price on January 22nd. But given that it is a similar game to Wingspan, you can probably approximate that the price will be similar to Wingspan. Alexis asks, will Matago translate this one into French pretty soon? That is a great question. That's not my information to share, but you're welcome to ask localization partners about this. I can say that if you look at our website, which hopefully is working now, that we do mention localization partners on that website. Doesn't mention the timing of when they'll release the games or anything like that. You can ask them about that or wait for them to release that information. But Matago is on that list as our French partner for Finspan. Alexa says, was it always a personal discard pile? Love this idea. Or was that something that got added after a bit of playtesting? That was definitely something that got added after playtesting. So the idea of not having resources in the game in the same way that we have resources in Wormspan and Wingspan was something that we were aiming for Finspan. We kind of knew we wanted to do that. In fact, we really did. We looked a lot at Wingspan and said, what can we do that would make this slightly more complex, slightly more accessible, avoid some of the rules questions that we get a lot about Wingspan. We looked at that a lot for Finspan. And using the cards as resources seemed like a nice way to go. So we planned to do that. But at first, the cards went to a shared discard pile. And people really did feel a lot of loss aversion about doing that, about getting rid of that card. This fish that I had in my hand that I was excited to play, I'm getting rid of it. I can't get it back. And that's why we changed that to something that, so I talked about development earlier. This is something that I push for as a developer, for each player to have their own personal discard pile. And once I mentioned that, then the designers came up with the idea of you having a way to get the cards back from the personal discard pile. I'll actually show you, there's even a built-in way to do that. If I can get out the player mat. So here is the player mat in Finspan. You're diving down. You can see there's some, actually this is different from Wingspan too. You have some fish that are pre-built into the mat already. And when you get down to the bottom, the first time that you get down to the bottom of a dive site each round, there's a special bonus down there. And this dive site says that there is, this icon means gain a fish, draw a fish from your personal discard pile. If you don't have any fish in your discard pile, you can just draw a fish from the deck. But yeah, you get to draw that from, gain one back from your discard pile. Also, thanks to Anna for doing the art for this this player mat. I think this was a fun challenge for her to do, and I think she did a wonderful job with it. There's one other thing, actually, one other mechanism that is unique about Finspan. You'll see again in tomorrow's design diary post. I'll list all the differences, but we have a mechanism where there are different depths on this player mat. There's the sunlight zone, the twilight, and the midnight zone. These all have different places where you can play fish. Some fish say that they live in different depths of water, bodies of water. You have to place them in those certain bodies of water. But the thing that's new about this is that when you dive, when you move your diver meeple down, there's a little icon at the top of the dive site that says, if you have a fish in this column, in this dive site, and in the zone directly below it. So one of these slots, if I have at least one fish, I get to draw a card. So this is an if activated ability. And there's another one here. So again, if I have a fish here, I get to draw a card. There are two slots potentially down here. And once you get down here, again, it says, if you have a fish in this dive site, in this zone of the dive site, I get to draw a card, at least one fish. And I have one built in right there. So even on the first turn of the game, I can go diving down this dive site and get a card, even though I haven't played any fish, because these fish are pre-built into the mat. One of the other new mechanisms there in Finspan. I'm probably way behind on questions here. I'll try to catch up here. Joshua says, because you're paying cards, will you be collecting cards faster? I would say, yeah, there's a little bit more card draw that just happens through the fish that you play. There's the dive site built in. Yeah, there's a little bit more card draw in Finspan. Yeah. Glitter M says, what is the difficulty level of Finspan? Finspan is designed to be a little bit less complex than Wingspan. So that is I don't know if there's a rating, a specific number that I can put behind that, but a little bit less complex than Wingspan. Are there sharks in the game? Whales, maybe? There are some sharks and there are some whales in Finspan. Definitely. Steven says, this is codename Crow. This is indeed codename Crow. Tim says, will there be a cross-play mode where you can use fish in Finspan as a food source for your water birds in Wingspan? Good question. No, there's no crossover at all between Finspan, Wingspan, and Wormspan. They're all completely independent games. Ross says, are there any other marine life, like other than fish, in the base game? Well, there are whales. Whales are mammals, and there are, I think whales are currently the main non-fish included. But I can definitely see us adding other aquatic life like sea turtles and octopus and cephalopods like octopi, octopuses, I believe is the term, crustaceans. I can see us adding those things in the future. Mark says, are all the fish ocean dwelling? No, they're from all different bodies of water. Yeah, So Jonas asked, will there be octopus in Finspan? I don't think there are any. I'm trying to think through all the fish. I don't think there are any octopus in Finspan, but that's something that I'd really like to add in the future. Matt says, which adaptation was more challenging to develop, Wormspan or Finspan? I think Finspan was more difficult. I don't even know exactly why, but yeah, it was a little bit more difficult to kind of simplify things, but still have many different interesting decisions that you can make in Finspan. That was a little bit more difficult than adding some things to the game like we did in Wormspan. Tony said, when did the world of Wingspan become a thing? I would say about a year and a half ago. That kind of became the title of the, oh no, maybe it couldn't have been that long ago. It was when Wormspan came along. Tony says, are you at all concerned about the perception of this as a retread? That was so, well, I don't know, retread. I did hear when Wormspan came out, some people thought that it was a reskin of Wingspan, which I think is a huge disservice to the amount of work that went into designing Wormspan. I can put the information, the facts out there, but I can't completely counter that perception. Tony says, does this mean you plan to continue to expand more Span games? We kind of see this as a trilogy of games, with Finspan being the slightly lighter version of Wingspan, then Wormspan. So I am happy with a trilogy of games in this world. I currently have no plans to do anything else beyond focusing on these 3 games. Ben Brent says, any reason you went with a fantasy creature like fish? I appreciate the realistic approach to both birds and dragons. I like that, Ben. Thanks, Chris. That's awesome, Chris. Chris is going to be a Geekway Mini. That's awesome, Chris. I look forward to seeing you there. And if anyone else is going to be a Geekway Mini in a few weeks, I look forward to playing some games with you there. That's going to be great. Chad says, did you pick the Innova Mako disc for the Finspan disc? We didn't, because I think we already used Mako for Red Rising. Instead, we do have a disc golf disc for Finspan with art from Miles Bensky. That is the Shark disc from Innova. Trishul says, the deluxe eggs. So I showed the deluxe components a second ago. Here's the deluxe pack. And I mentioned the eggs are a bit squishy. And indeed, the inspiration came from the Everdell berries, the squishy berries in Everdell. Berwin says, do the cards offer facts about the fish? They do indeed. Here, I'll pull another card back out to show you. Yeah. You can see that the fact is down there. I'm going to ruin the focus here. One other thing that's a little bit unique about Finspan, something that we haven't done before, is that there are 10 cards that we consider starting cards in the game. They have a different back. They look the same for the most part, but they have a different back. Let's see if I can find them offhand. Yeah, here they go. So you can see the backs of the normal cards look like this. The backs of the starter cards look like this. They can stand out a little bit. Each player gets 2 starter cards. It gave the designers a little bit of flexibility to ensure that each player had some basic things that would be easy to play early in the game and be useful early in the game. You also get some other cards. And unlike Wingspan, there's no decision that you make before you actually start playing the game. You get 2 starter cards and 3 basic cards. You get a few tokens on your mat. You don't have a separate supply of tokens like in Wingspan and Wormspan. All tokens are kept on your mat within the ocean, in your ocean. But I thought that was a neat addition to have these separate starter cards. Let's see. I'm going to, if I've answered a question fairly recently, I'll skip over it because I'm so far behind on questions. But if I miss a question or if you miss me answering a question, feel free to ask again in a few minutes. Corey says, any plans for a neoprene mat? We actually use rubber play mats, natural rubber play mats, but I know what you're talking about, neoprene style play mats as a board replacement. We decided not to go for that for Finspan. Part of the reason is I know some people like those mats, and we might make them in the future if there's demand for them. but they don't fit into the box, and that's it. Kind of leaves people in a tough space to buy these mats, but not have a place to really put them. So I'm open to feedback about that. I'm certainly open to making them in the future if we want to make them. But yeah, we didn't make them originally for Finspan for that reason. Chad says, will aquatic mammals, whales, orca be included in Finspan? There are some whales. So those are the, I don't think there's any orca, but there are a few whales in the game. I believe there are a few whales. I know there's a whale shark. I actually could be wrong about that. Hopefully I haven't misspoken about that, but it is possible that there aren't. Yeah, so here's the whale shark. This is actually so many points. 12 points over here, right there. 12 points. I think probably the most points in the game. But maybe I'm thinking of that, and there actually isn't a whale in the game. There may not be. There may not be, actually. Sorry if I've misspoken about that. I was thinking of the whale shark. So it might just be all fish in the core game. And Jacob says, is that a fish bone icon for getting back the discarded fish? That is indeed a fish bone icon for getting back the discarded fish. Anthony also said, do the fish have fun facts? And yes, they do. I'm sorry, I'm answering questions that were just recently asked, but it's hard for me not to do that. Ann Mieke says, will it be available worldwide? Yes, Finspan will be available in English worldwide from Stonemaier Games on January 22nd when we launch it on our web store. We actually have 4 different web stores, one in the US, one in Europe, one in Australia that serves Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, and one in Canada. And so you'll be able to get it directly from us, from one of those web stores, or from retailers about a month later. And then there are other localization partners who are localizing Finspan into other languages as well. Angelo says, will there be a demo available on Tabletopia? There will indeed be a demo available on Tabletopia. There will also be an interactive tutorial available from Diest. That will be available next Friday, I believe. And the Tabletopia demo will be available soon. I actually don't know the offhand about the exact date of that. So I'm glad you asked about that. I will check in with Tabletopia. I know they've finished working on it, but I don't know if it's ready yet. Ann says, how many fish cards in the game? There are 135 fish cards in Finspan, all unique, all uniquely illustrated. Paul asked why I use codename Crow for this game, and it was kind of just a wink at Wingspan, because Wingspan has and there's also actually a crow fish, I believe, in Wingspan as well. Are the pre-printed fish different for each player map? They aren't. We did think about that. We thought about that, but we decided against it. They're intentionally placed in very specific places, and they're all like very small fish, which means that they're easy to consume. Something that you can always do in Finspan whenever you play a fish card. You can, if you want, place it on top of an existing fish if the fish is smaller. So we thought about it, but we decided against it for balance reasons. Lucas says, are there saltwater fish and freshwater fish? There are. You can actually see this top row is the freshwater row. So yeah, there are some freshwater fish as well as saltwater fish in the game. Trishul says, would the personal discard pile concept be feasible also in Wing or Wormspan? That's something we could try. You're always welcome to try anything. You're welcome to try it, but that is not something that we have thought about for those games. Luke says, you did a launch bundle with Stamp Swap and Apiary expansion. Will you have a Wormspan, Wingspan launch bundle? I don't. Well, Finspan is its own thing. It is absolutely related to Wingspan, but we aren't launching Wormspan. We aren't launching Wingspan. We're launching Finspan. So Finspan will be available at a discount on January 22nd, but not Wingspan or not Wormspan. Those prices are going to stay the same, or at least that is the plan. But we do have some other products that are launching on January 22nd as well that are not related, but they're there for shipping consolidation. So, for example, the Ironclad Gears of Corruption will be back in stock on January 22nd in most regions, not Australia, because we messed up there. And we have a few other products that I'll talk about soon. Today, I want to focus mostly on Finspan, but yeah, we will have a few other products that you can consolidate, including the upgrade pack for Finspan, including the Rolling Realms promo realm for Finspan. Do I have that in front of me? No, I don't have that handy right now. Yeah, so a few other products there. David says, is Finspan playable for kids who can't read yet? That's been the biggest barrier for Wingspan in our household. It can. Yeah, we designed Wingspan or Finspan specifically so that everything is told in icons. We do have helpful text along with those icons. Like, for example, this one says, if activated, all players get to hatch an egg into a young. This is the all players icon. This is the hatch icon. And the brown background means if activated. And so you can, even without reading the text, you have complete visual clue. The visuals describe exactly what you're doing. And so it's kind of a nice pairing, I believe, between icons and text. You don't need the text, but the text is there to support the icons. Yeah. Maximus says, are the artists the same as from Wingspan? One of the artists is. Anna is one of the Wingspan artists. Her sister Catalina was a big help for Finspan. And Mesa Shoemaker also came in and helped out with Finspan. And Natalia did a little bit of the art. And Natalia mainly focuses on Wingspan, but she did help out with a little bit of the art for Finspan. Patrick says, are there going to be any diver mechanisms such as decompressing in it? No, I think that would have been a little bit more complex than what we were looking for in Finspan. Here are the diver meeples, though. I can show you those. Here are the different diver meeples. Every player has their own player color. And these act as the kind of the action cubes in Wingspan or as the coins in Finspan. Or I'm sorry, in Wormspan. We have too many spans now in Wormspan. And unlike Wormspan, if you're familiar with that, and more like Wingspan, in Finspan, every player has a set number of actions. You have 6 actions, 6 diver meeples to use in each round of the game. Chad says, is there a Seocalanth? I'm not familiar with that one, Chad. That is not a familiar term to me. I don't believe that's in the game. And Mieke say, are the last continents of Wingspan still on the plan? Yes. So Wingspan's expansion progress is completely independent of Finspan, completely independent of Wingspan. Elizabeth does help out with these games, but she doesn't let that impede the time that she spends on Wingspan expansions. We do still plan to release expansions for the 3 remaining continents for Wingspan. One of them is almost finished with the design process. Julio says, what's my favorite fish so far? I think just due to the aesthetic and it being on the box, I think the flying fish is probably my favorite fish in Finspan so far. Obo309 says, when deciding on making a sibling game like this, what is your tactic for differentiating it from other games to consumers? I think the balance is both through marketing and the actual mechanisms of the game of making it familiar but different. We've seen many different series of games do this. Great Western Trail, Azul does it, Dominion to a certain extent, familiar but different. So that way it's welcoming for people who already know the game, but that there are a number of mechanisms that make it stand out, that give this game a place on the shelf next to Wingspan and Wormspan. And so that's why, and part of it is the theme too. We're not just looking to reskin Wingspan to use the exact same mechanisms and paste in some new art and different names. That's not what we want to do. Like that, anyone can make a kind of a fan version of Wingspan that does that. We really wanted to embrace the aquatic theme through the mechanisms of the game. So that's what we tried to do. We being mostly designers with my support as a developer, with Elizabeth's support as a developer as well. Scootman says, was there prerogative to make even more differences between Wing and Finspan based on some vocal criticisms of Wormspan? So I think the vocal criticisms of Wormspan were that it was a reskin of Wingspan, which is just not true at all. And so those criticisms, while unfortunate, because I think it's just not true, did not impact the design of Finspan. I would say there are actually even more differences between Wingspan and Wormspan as there are between Wingspan and Finspan. Yeah. Rich says, are the cards the same size as Wingspan and Wormspan? They are the same size, but as you can see, they are horizontal cards. They're horizontal cards because they were diving down. And for this reason, we highly encourage, it's kind of really officially in the rulebook of Finspan, that you keep the cards, you keep your hand of cards to the left side of your player mat, and you keep your personal discard pile to the right side of your player mat, and you keep them just face up over here. It's a little bit awkward to hold vertical cards in hand And so it's much easier if you can just keep them face up on the table. Delta Meta says, how did you decide what elements to include in the base game versus potential expansions during the game design process? Our method is put everything that works and that is fun and that makes sense for the core game, put it in the core game. Don't hold anything back. So that's what we did. We put everything that we had, all the good ideas that worked well, that were functional and fun and balanced, we put them into Finspan. And then we acknowledged that if the game goes over well, that we would add expansions that dive deeper into specific types of aquatic life, because there is so much incredible aquatic life in the oceans and rivers and ponds and lakes of the world. Let's see. Again, I know I'm behind on questions. I'm sorry about that. Cozy Board Game says, are the male and female deep sea anglerfish in the game? They are fascinating and different. I believe there is a deep sea anglerfish. I don't know if the fun facts mention the male and female, anything about that for those fish in particular. Jackie says, please tell me the Wingspan expansion will come out sooner rather than later. Jackie, I want to correct this misinformation here. You say it feels like it's being pushed to the back of the queue. It is not at all being pushed to the back of the queue. Rather, expansions take time, and we respect our designers to take the time to get expansions. And so Elizabeth has been working on the Wingspan expansion for quite some time now. And when it's ready, it's ready. We're not pushing her in any way because we want to give her the time and space for all her other projects. Not Finspan, not Wormspan, all the design projects that she has. But also just for her to get the expansion right in its due time. So it is not pushed back or delayed in any way. Anything that we've asked Elizabeth to do, any decision that we've made, anything related to Wingspan, to Finspan or Wormspan, it's just sometimes expansions take time to make. And we'd rather get it right, get an expansion right, than rush it out and not have it be something that brings joy to tabletops worldwide. But I can assure you that the expansion for Wingspan has been making constant progress, and that is not being held back or pushed back for any reason related to really anything other than our respect for Elizabeth Hargrave's time. Alexa says, is there tucking in Finspan? There is. It's called consuming in Finspan. So you can either consume fish that are already played or... that's the main way that you consume fish that you already played. And there are ways that you can consume fish. There's like a benefit that you can use to consume fish, which amounts to tucking in Wingspan. Let's see. So, hey, Steve says, am I enjoying the wild amount of snow that we've gotten this week? And yeah, Steve, I appreciate this. I'll take a quick break to talk about some non-Finspan stuff very briefly. We had a huge amount of snow and ice here in St. Louis over the last couple of days. And I walked over to the grocery store yesterday and almost slipped a few times. It's very icy out there and kind of tough to drive in. So yeah, poor weather here in St. Louis. My recent video was about the top 10 games of 2024. I did a blog post the other day about GameFound, thanks to some interviews I did with the folks over at GameFound. Getting lots of playtest reports for various games recently. And my question of the day for those of you who are watching here is, what was the most memorable gaming experience that you had in 2024? Whether it was a specific game, a gaming event, a gaming moment, a moment in a specific game. I'd love for you to reflect on that and let me know what was most memorable, your most memorable moment. Nicole says, how large of a table do you need to play this game? Excited to see the full layout, reference images. So the mat, it's actually a little bit, so this was what the mat would look like for Wingspan or Wormspan. It's kind of like one section bigger than those mats, but it's vertical. And so it kind of depends on how you position these on the table, but it does take up quite a bit of vertical space, but you don't have to, you can stagger them to fit pretty well around the table. I don't have an exact number for how much table space it takes up. It does depend on the player count. It's a 1 to 5 player game. But I think the mats are pretty flexible in how you orient them related to the other mats on the table. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have an exact question for that. Garrett says, will there be a watch it play video for Finspan? There will be. There will indeed be a watch it play video. The media date for Finspan, when you'll start to see playthroughs and reviews, things like that, is on January 17th, so next Friday. New Water says, how does the box size compare to Wingspans? I believe it's exactly the same box size. Wingspan, if that, it might be like ever so slightly shallower than the Wingspan box, but I think it's exactly the same size as the Wingspan box. Anthony says, will there be a Swift starter pack to help play a few turns? There isn't, but we have a really robust reference card. Every player gets one of these. I will say that again. Every player gets a reference card. If you have reference cards in games, give every player one, not just one for the table. But we also included starter fish in the game. These starter fish are the equivalent of the Swift Start Pack, where it's just kind of saying, play one of these as your first play of the game, or when you're deciding which fish to play early in the game, play one of your starter fish. That's a good idea. Hey, Steve says, will this be on Dized? It will be on Dized. We'll have an interactive tutorial for Finspan on Dized starting next Friday. They've been working on it for a while. Ben Brent says, is there any reason you announce games just before they become available? Surprise, this will be out this month. Yeah, the reason for that is we like to announce things, with the exception of games like Vantage, that have a lot to discuss and a lot to showcase. When we show you something that we're really excited about, and that we hope that you get excited about, we want you to be able to take that excitement and actually have the game in your hands within a reasonable amount of time. So that's why we're announcing Finspan now. We're going to reveal it. Even the rulebook is available now, so you can see that. But there will be a bunch of design diary posts and videos over the next 10 days. And then in 2 weeks, January 22nd, you'll be able to order it. And within a few days or weeks after that, you'll actually have it in your hands. So we like to keep that anticipation excitement gap pretty tight, pretty close. Edward says, has the development of this game or Wingspan inspired me to visit the St. Louis Zoo? I actually live pretty close to the St. Louis Zoo, so I love visiting it. I don't know if I actually visited the St. Louis Aquarium for Finspan, but not the zoo. We have a great aquarium here as well. Or I would say a pretty good aquarium. Trishul says, have I gone diving in real life? I haven't gone diving, but I have found how amazing snorkeling is. I had never snorkeled before up until around 2 years ago. And this past year, around this time last year, actually, I was in the Grand Cayman, and I went snorkeling a lot in Grand Cayman. There's so many incredible fish, like right offshore in Grand Cayman. We even went to Stingray City, off Grand Cayman, which is incredible, where you have stingrays that just come up and say hi and look for food. I snorkeled, that you don't really need to snorkel there, but I have my snorkel handy there. Yeah, so I really, really loved snorkeling, and seeing it, knowing that Finspan was in the works and being part of the development for Finspan while I was snorkeling made it even more incredible. Let's see. Andrew says, is this the 2025 teaser for Finspan? What has wings but cannot fly? I'm not going to spoil that, Andrew, but that's a very good guess. So I did tease 3 little riddles for 2025, and I will reveal what those riddles mean at the end of the year. Aaron says, will there be a Finspan Rolling Realms promo? There will be. For those of you who don't know, Rolling Realms is a different game that we have. That is, whenever you play Rolling Realms, you pull out 3 random realms, and you play with those combination of realms. And we create promo realms that are inspired by other games. And Finspan will have a promo realm in Rolling Realms. But I wish I had that on the table next to me. I don't have it right here next to me, but yeah, I should have had that handy. I'll make a note about that. Finspan promo. Let's see. Steve says, I know you mentioned no mats at launch. Yeah, so we don't have rubber play mats available at launch, but are there any premium component upgrades which will be available for launch? And there are. Yeah, I showed them a little bit earlier in the video. Here is the upgrade pack for the components for the schools, the young, and the eggs. In Finspan, you lay eggs, you hatch those eggs into young, the yellow ones here, and then when you can actually move young around, and when you have 3 young on one space, you pick them all up and they become a school, which is worth a lot more points. Eggs and young are worth 1 point at the end of the game. Schools, which are 3 young, are worth 6 points at the end of the game. Joshua says, do you anticipate MeepleSource creating a ton of diver meeples or young school tokens? The latter may be visually confusing to players, though. Maybe. We do love seeing what MeepleSource and other third-party accessory creators create. But I think we have a pretty good viable upgrade pack here, and the diver meeples are meeples already. So, and they're all custom little meeples that fit perfectly on the map. Hey, Andrew. Andrew says, can you tell us about the designer? Actually, two designers, David and Michael. Michael has been a developer for other games. He's helped a lot of other designers. I don't think he has another published game up to this point. David has a few games that have been published, including the very recent Monkey Palace, which is the Lego game that was released a few months ago. Oh, and Andrew, that's awesome that you'll be at Geekway Mini. I look forward to playing some games with you at Geekway Mini. That's great. Hopefully the snow and ice will be out of the way by then. Sergio says, will there be an insect span? So we don't have plans for any other World of Wingspan games. I am happy with this being a trilogy of games. I don't want to overstretch it, and I think there's a lot of things that we can do with Finspan and with Wormspan, and we have 3 expansions for Wingspan to come as well. So there's a lot in this world for us to explore already. Yeah. So I don't think there will be. I don't hold me to this. This could change in the future, but we really don't have any plans for any other World of Wingspan games at this time. Mark says, are the points linked to endangered status of different species or more generic? The points are linked to how difficult a card is to play, how useful the ability of it is, where it can be played, like how many restrictions. So it's based on a number of other factors. It is not based on whether or not they are endangered. Mark says, is there any reference to the negative impact of overfishing on certain species? There isn't, but this is not a game about fishing. This is not a game about catching fish. This is not a game about trapping fish. This is a game about observing and seeking fish. That is a core part of the theme of Finspan. This is a game about diving down to look at fish, not to catch them, not to fish them, not to kill them. I do want to be perfectly transparent. I say that as someone who is personally a pescatarian. So I do occasionally eat fish. I'm mainly vegetarian, but I do occasionally eat fish. So this is not a stance for me to say that I think people that shouldn't fish or shouldn't eat fish, things like that. I do eat some fish. I don't eat octopus, though. I watched a movie called My Octopus Teacher, and it made me not want to eat octopus anymore after watching that. It's a really beautiful movie. Flo also asked if I've tried scuba diving. Flo says, I tried it once and saw an octopus and some barracudas. It was awesome. I did see some barracudas while snorkeling in Grand Cayman. Or it was in Grand Cayman that I saw them, and that was pretty incredible. But I didn't see any octopus. I saw one stingray just out and about in Grand Cayman before we went to Stingray City. And that was while snorkeling as well. Andrew says, any chance that with all the new releases lately that more Stonemaier games will make their way to Board Game Arena? I was so happy to see Scythe arrive last year. Our method for Board Game Arena and full games with even more full AI, like Wingspan Digital, is to release them a few years after the tabletop game. We want the tabletop to be the first place that people experience these games, and then a few years later they can be on Board Game Arena. So it's entirely up to the developers at Board Game Arena which of their games they want to put on that platform. But that is the goal for our games to be there around 2 to 3 years after the tabletop game release. Alex says, is it only fish or other aquatic animals such as dolphins or squids? You know, earlier I said I thought that there were some mammals, some whales in the game, but I think I was mistaking it with the whale shark. So I believe that there are only fish in the core game of Finspan, but we are hoping to explore other types of aquatic species like a squid. A squid, I believe, is a cephalopod, like an octopus, and dolphins and whales, and go deeper into the fish that are also in Finspan in potential future expansions. Yeah. Brandon says, do you have the same number of actions each turn? It doesn't go down like Wingspan. You're right. That actually is a little bit different about Wingspan. In Finspan, you have the exact same number of actions each turn or each round. You have 6 diver meeples. You use all those diver meeples each round. We actually did something a little bit different. I'm curious to see what people end up thinking about this because it is a little bit out there. But there's round-to-round scoring in Finspan. I'll show you what that looks like. Where's the goal board? Here is the goal board in Finspan. So it has 2 sides. I'm sorry. Whoa. Jumped out of my hands there like a fish. There's 2 sides to the goal board, the achievement board. There's this side where you have pre-printed goals, one pre-printed for each of the end of game stuff here. And there's another side that has different places for tiles. You put tiles down here, randomizing the different goals when you play this side. It is nice for setup just to say, okay, let's just put this side. This is a good teaching side. We talked about teaching earlier. I recommend using this side when teaching Finspan. What was I getting at here? But you score as you go. So you actually use the score pad as you play the game. So when you score for week 1, you score for it. So like here it says for each egg and each young that you have, you get a point. And you score for that right away. And you write it down on the score pad right then and there. So you don't wait till the end of the game to score. You score as you go week to week in Finspan for those end of round scoring categories. Let's see. Mark has a nice comment. Mark got to play it. It looks like so he's already had the chance to play. He says the game is incredibly smooth and very easy to pick up. You immediately want to play again. Next game is tonight. So Mark. Since Mark is linked to he is our official distributor of the French version in Canada, he's gotten to play it a little bit early. That's great, Mark. Yeah, thanks for the comments about that. It does play. One of the things about Finspan is that we wanted to play a little bit faster than Finspan and definitely faster than Wormspan. So the box says 45 to 60 minutes. That has very much been my experience when playing Finspan, especially since the main interaction of the game is positive player interaction. There are many cards in the game that say, when you activate this card, when you play this card, all players get a benefit. But beyond that, it's very easy to play with overlapping turns where I can say, okay, I know this turn, I am diving down the middle dive site, and I can look down there and see that there are no abilities that impact other players. And I can say that. And so while I'm diving, the next player can start to take their turn. And so there's no attacking other players. This is not part of the World of Wingspan to attack other players, to do anything that really impedes other players. And because you're drawing, and so it's very easy for the next player to go ahead and take their turn while you're taking your turn, in many cases. Quick read of the rules says it seems much lighter than Wingspan. It is not accurate that it's much lighter. It is lighter than Wingspan, but not much lighter than Wingspan. Luke says... also, Luke talks about difficulty. You mentioned Finspan difficulty level being just below Wingspan. Do you see replicating the idea of a trilogy of games with increasing complexity in the future? As a game night host, I enjoy this. I appreciate that feedback, Luke. And I wouldn't say that that's a plan for our other games. I think the Wingspan brand is a little bit unique in that way. But if we ever had another, I guess Scythe is maybe the other brand that's close to Wingspan that we have. And I did release Expeditions. I think Expeditions, I would say, is a little bit lighter than Scythe, but it was not a focus. When I was designing Expeditions, I wasn't saying I want to make a lighter Scythe. I just wanted to make a game that felt like Scythe, that wasn't Scythe. So maybe in the future, but that was something very specifically we did for the World of Wingspan. Yeah. Snakey Snake Long says, do you announce the price yet, or is that still coming? The price we'll announce on January 22nd when we launch Finspan on our web store. But given that it is very similar in terms of components and gameplay to Wingspan, you can look for a price that's similar to the price for Wingspan. Chad says, aside from the player mats, how many game boards are in the game? It's a 1 to 5 player game, so there are 5 game mats in the game. Yeah. Damon J says, will you have the metal mech sold separately for Gears of Corruption? So our Expeditions expansion, Ironclad Gears of Corruption, will be back in stock on January 22nd. And at that time, we will have the metal mechs available separately for the expansion and separately for the core game itself. Dean says, have I lost weight? I don't think so. No, in fact, I think I gained a little bit of weight recently. No. Just a little bit, just a tiny little bit. I weigh myself exactly once a month. I've read that is like the healthy amount to if you are going to weigh yourself, to not do it every day, to do it once a month. And so that's what I do. Yeah. Let's see. Obo309 says, was a trilogy plan set in motion as soon as Wingspan was a success? No, we waited a while after Wingspan. It wasn't really a plan after Wingspan was a big hit. We didn't say, okay, we want to do other stuff with it. We kind of took a while to, I don't know, appreciate what we had with Wingspan and try to do what we had with the game itself. And then we kept getting requests from people to make other games using kind of that platform. And that's when we had a good internal discussion about making Wormspan a slightly heavier version of Wingspan, and then Finspan a slightly lighter version of Wingspan. Obo309 says, do designers approach you, or do you approach designers for other games of the trilogy? We approach the designers for the most part. I reached out to Connie, and I also reached out to David and Michael. But I mentioned a little bit earlier that Michael had worked on, just for fun, an icon-only version of Wingspan. That was essentially a reskin of Wingspan using any cards that could be explained through icons only. And that was a neat experiment. That isn't what Finspan became, but it was a neat experiment to show that some of the abilities in a Wingspan can be distilled down to a single icon. And that's an approach that we took in Finspan when we decided on the abilities that would be in Finspan. So I asked a little bit earlier if anyone has a favorite gaming memory from 2024, and I see some answers here happening. Zach says, designing a game. So designing his own game was a great memory for him. That's awesome, Zach. Hilder says, playing Wormspan with their sister for their birthday in December. Took a day off work and enjoyed a game day. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Hilder. Joshua says his favorite moment was finally getting to check out Endeavor Deep Sea, another aquatic themed game, and playing Wormspan with his fiance for a week straight. That's awesome, Joshua. Miles says his favorite moment was playing Blob Party at the Gamers Ranch. That was quite memorable. I remember that as well, Miles. I see some other great answers here. I won't necessarily read all of them out loud because I know I'm behind on questions, but thank you for answering those questions. Genrico says no plans for an apiary expansion. The apiary expansion actually came out back in October. So there were plans for it and we made it happen, and it's actually released worldwide now. So if you're looking for an apiary expansion, we've got you covered. It's out there. Renato says, are there any expansions planned for Wormspan? There are. In fact, we have it on our progress chart right here. You can see Wormspan expansion right here. Wormspan expansion in progress. On track for 2025 currently. This chart is on our general newsletter every month, and it's also on the news page of our website. Michael says, I want to know which languages it will be available in. Finspan will be available in the future. If you look at the Finspan page of our website, you can see a list of all of our localization partners who have said publicly that they are releasing their version of Finspan. Julio says, Grand Cayman is the prettiest Caribbean island I've been to. I can't wait to take his wife there sometime. Not me, this is Julio, his wife. Did you get to see the natural blowholes? We did. I don't know if we saw exactly the ones that you're talking about, but we did go to a specific place that had some pretty incredible blowholes where the water just spurts way up in the air. There was one, I feel like we had a meal right near some of those blowholes. Zoran says, will Finspan be available from Serbian? Check out our website. Check out the Finspan page of our website to see if we mentioned Serbian there. And if not, feel free to let the publisher who makes the Serbian version of Wingspan, let them know that you're interested in a Serbian version of Finspan, just in case they aren't already considering it. Tam says, Wingspan is a great educational game that gets many people interested in birds. Does Stonemaier do anything special to promote games like Wingspan and Finspan as semi-educational games? I wouldn't say that we lean into the educational aspect of these games. I do agree that they do have an educational side. Oftentimes when teachers ask me for a game that they can bring to their classroom, I actually typically recommend Between Two Cities and Between Two Castles because they really encourage communication skills. But yeah, there is definitely some informational, some educational elements of Finspan and Wormspan or Wingspan, not necessarily Wormspan, but Wingspan and Finspan. We are donating. So sometimes I say, like, based on a certain number of signups, we'll donate that amount to different aquatic organizations for Finspan. In this case, we're just going to make a donation to a couple different aquatic organizations that do good work for aquatic life. I did want to mention Tam. I'm glad you commented because I mentioned earlier that David is the designer of Monkey Palace. Tam is the co-designer of Monkey Palace. And Tam, I didn't give you credit there. I'm sorry about that, but I am going to mention it now that you co-designed a wonderful game, Monkey Palace, the Lego game with David, who co-designed Finspan with Michael O'Connell. Okay, I know I'm still behind on questions, but I have more time. I'll answer the questions that I have left to go. Ray says, is the fact that this is another designer's game the reason that 2025 will be a 3-game year for Stonemaier? No, it's more like this is when we think these games are ready. We have Finspan releasing very early in 2025, Vantage later this year, and then we do have plans for another game in Essen releasing later this year as well. So I know 3 is a little bit on the high end. I prefer to release 2 games a year, but this is just how it's working out for when these games will be ready. At least that's currently the plan. That could change based on when it's actually ready. American Bald Guy says, is there a way to submit games to your company and what sort of criteria do you employ? There is. I'd recommend looking into the submission guidelines on our website. That is where you can see information about the types of games that we exactly how to submit those games to us. Ryan says, is there any news about the next Wingspan expansion? Elizabeth is working on the design of it. I would say it's in the late design stages right now, the next Wingspan expansion. And I look forward to seeing the next version from her. It still needs some blind playtesting, even though it has gone through a few rounds of blind playtesting already. The art is in the final third, I would say, of being ready. There's a lot of art in this expansion. Theo also asked, are there any updates on the upcoming Wormspan expansion? So just today, I actually did send out a World of Wingspan newsletter. You may have gotten that. You may have seen the news about Finspan there, but you also can see news about Wingspan and Wormspan in the World of Wingspan newsletter. I'd highly recommend subscribing to that if you don't already. And in it, I do talk just very briefly about where we are on the Wormspan expansion. It is currently in the graphic design stage of the process. Let's see. I am almost caught up on questions here. Here we go. Abby says, I read the email. Am I understanding correctly that the game is releasing on January 22nd? Not quite. Close. The Finspan is launching on our web store on January 22nd. It will start shipping in the days and weeks that follow immediately after that. The retail release, the worldwide retail release, is about a month after that. First to brick and mortar stores, and then a few weeks later to online stores. Horde of the Board says, congrats on Finspan. Who chose the fish that goes on the cover? And when can we expect more news on Vantage and the release date? I usually choose the cover fish, and that was the case here. I thought the flying fish was the right fish to go on the cover, and I asked Anna to put particular focus into this fish. There are 2 flying fish in the game, and I chose this one as the cover fish, just because it kind of says Wingspan, but with a fish. Yeah. Horde of the Board says, when can we expect more news on Vantage and a release date? The release date I won't know for Vantage until we're much more close to the actual release. Right now, we are in the pre-production stage of Vantage, and the next update should be, it's usually on between the 20th and the 25th of every month. So yeah, you'll get an update if you subscribe around that time this month. Andre says, are there resources? I saw the promo video and apparently cards are the currency. Cards are the primary currency in Finspan, but there are tokens as well. That you can sometimes spend, and they are used for different forms. So there's the eggs that hatch into young. Tokens again that flip over. You flip it over into young, and then when you have 3 young on one space, it becomes a school. These are sometimes used as resources. They all exist in your ocean, so they aren't off to the side. They're in your ocean. You can actually move the young and schools around. And some fish cards have costs that say they need you to spend. It's a fish that eats eggs or a fish that eats young. Let's see. Chad says, have you taken any copyright actions to try to prevent any other publisher from using the span verbiage? We haven't. We trademark the names for our games. We trademarked Finspan a couple of years ago. But no, we can't really prevent someone from using. I think the whole idea of trademarks, though, is to prevent confusion. So we don't like to be litigious. We really don't like to do that. But if someone did create a game that really made it seem like they were trying to pretend to be a World of Wingspan game based on the name that they used, we might ask them not to do that, and we would see how they would respond to that. Thank you, Nicole. Nicole says she loves the color palette of the components, moving away from the generic red, yellow, green, and blue to the colored diver meeples. Yeah, here are the diver meeples in the game. Really, one of the main reasons for this, Nicole, is that we were looking for colors that weren't used for other things in the game. We already have, here's the deluxe components, but we have orange, yellow, and red as main components in the game. And we wanted the diver meeples to stand out and not be confused for those components. But I'm glad you like those colors. Yeah. I do have a Tales from Production video coming in a couple days that you'll be able to see some of the production decisions that we made when putting together the product design for Finspan. Let's see if there's a few more questions here. Trishul says, is looking forward to starting the Rise of Fenris campaign soon. This is the Scythe campaign expansion. Any designer hints or recommendations? How much preparation should the game master do? Really not much. We designed the Rise of Fenris so that you could just sit down and open the scenario with everyone together and go through the setup steps and the few little twists of the rules for that scenario and do it together. I'd actually recommend doing it together, not doing any preparation for that in advance. So yeah, I don't think you really, there's some stuff early in the rulebook before you get to the scenarios. You probably want to read through that, but I would say intentionally do not read the first scenario. Wait until you have everyone together there to read that. Martin says, how do you as a publisher choose which themes are suitable? Do you follow trends or do you explore new themes as well? No, we definitely don't follow trends because like for a game like Finspan, we started working on this game. It was either 2 or 3 years ago. So it's well before we would have any idea that there might be a trend for it. We decided that this was the right theme to expand Wingspan in a slightly less complex version of Wingspan. So it just depends on the game. It depends on game to game. One of the reasons we went with fish here is that a lot of people had requested it. A lot of people over time have said, will you do an aquatic version of Wingspan? And so one of the ways that we expand our brands is that we listen to people and see what they're interested in. Not the only way, but that is one of the ways. Austin says, are there plans to launch Apiary on BGA? So Austin, what I can say about this is around 2 years after a game is released, we reach out to BGA and we say, do you have a developer interested in putting this game of ours on Board Game Arena? And if they say yes, then usually it takes another year after that for them to actually get it ready for that, for Board Game Arena. And Board Game Arena announces games when they are ready. So it's not, at that point, it is no longer my news to share. It's their news to share. So I can share that schedule, but I can't share about specific games. That's up to BGA. Oftentimes they put a game on alpha before I even know about it. And I learned about it through other ways. People are like, hey, did you know your game is on alpha? And I'm like, oh, cool. That's great to hear that they are at that point in the process for one of the games that we authorize them to put on Board Game Arena. Joe says, is Finspan more approachable for first-time board gamers than Wingspan? I would say it is slightly more approachable than Wingspan, but it is still a medium weight game. So it is not I don't want to say gateway game. I would say it's a gateway plus game. But it's probably, if it's someone who has not played modern games, I probably would not introduce Finspan to them as the very first game that they play. There are probably a few other games that I'd do after that first. Diego says, sold of Wormspan in 2024. I'm going to share these exact numbers when I do our stakeholder report, but I believe it was around 200,000 copies in all languages. Mendor says, is there a game like Scythe in production? There is a sequel to Scythe. It's called Expeditions, and we actually already have an expansion to the Expeditions called Gears of Corruption. Anko says, when the new Andrew Bosley game? So Andrew Bosley is working on a series of games in a world that he's creating, or he's working on the world, working on a series of games in that world. And the when is when they're ready. So that is the when that I have at this time. Ian says, why crow for the codename of Finspan? Is it just a Wingspan reference? Yes, mostly just a Wingspan reference. And there is a crow fish, or fish crow? It's a fish crow. I said crowfish earlier. It's a fish crow in Wingspan. And so it was a 4-letter word that I could use for a code name for Finspan. Andrew says, how do you become a playtester at Stonemaier Games? Thank you for asking about that, Andrew. You become a playtester by first signing up to be a Stonemaier ambassador. And then once every 1 to 2 years, if we need more lead playtesters, we have a great batch of them. But if we need more, I will send out a test to Stonemaier ambassadors who want to become playtesters, and they can fill out that test. And then if you pass that test, then I add you to our lead playtester list. And if in the future I have a game for you to playtest, I reach out to you. Yeah, that's how you do it. Abby says, as a proud Stonemaier champion member, thank you, Abby. I get all my Stonemaier goodies through the web store. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. It's also totally fine if you want to support your local retailer. We highly recommend that too, but I do appreciate Stonemaier champions buying from us directly. And anyone, even if you're not a champion, you can buy from us directly as well. Abby says that they tried Euphoria and Wormspan for the first time this week, and we love both of them. That's awesome. I'm glad you give them a try, and I'm glad you enjoyed them. Thanks for doing that. Paul says, before I get back to teaching you, that we played Between Two Castles last week and had an absolute blast. That's awesome. Thank you for trying Between Two Castles. Thank you, Paul, for saying that. I appreciate that. Chad says, does the rulebook have that great linen texture? I sure hope so. Where is the rulebook for Finspan? I think it's deep down in the box. I don't have it. Where is the rulebook for Finspan? I'll have to find the rulebook for Finspan in this copy. But it does have that linen texture. Yeah. Where in the world is this rulebook? Must be sandwiched. Oh, here we go. Here's the rulebook. Yeah, it does. Yeah, Finspan or Wingspan game. It is our new smaller rulebook size. You can see we have icons on the back page. We use this rulebook size now because it makes it easier for you to leave the rulebook on the table and use it as a reference throughout the game. Steve says, yeah, I'm over an hour in. I haven't mentioned the chocolate of the day. Today's chocolate of the day, I don't know, Steve. It might be, I'm looking over at my candy, which I keep out of reach. I keep it off my desk. I have some dark chocolate Pocky left over from my Japan trip. I might finish those off today. We'll say that. So Pedro mentioned, so I mentioned earlier that we don't have any plans to expand Wingspan beyond the trilogy. We have Wingspan, the slightly lighter Finspan, slightly heavier Wormspan. The one exception that I am open to happening someday is if the Pokemon company lets us create a Pokemon version of Wingspan. We have asked them and they have said no. They really haven't even wanted to talk to us about it, which is understandable because Pokemon is a huge brand and they already have a card-driven game for Pokemon called Pokemon. But I think that is the one exception. If someday the Pokemon company were to say, hey, we like what you're doing with the Wingspan brand, we are open to you doing a Pokemon version of Wingspan, we would absolutely consider that. Let's see. Anarcho asks, is there an announced release date yet? So we will launch Finspan on our web store and start shipping it almost immediately afterward on January 22nd. And that's followed about a month later by the retail release date to brick and mortar stores, and then a few weeks later to online game stores. Ian says, have you thought about introducing any of the Span Games cards as collector cards and packs? No, we haven't thought about doing that. I kind of delved into that topic in a recent blog post, not related to Wingspan specifically, but in the idea of like rarity and things like that. That I'm open to doing promo packs for sure, that are not randomized, that are not rare or collectible in any way. They're just additional elements to games, but we haven't thought about doing collector's versions of those packs. I'm scrolling through. I know I'm seeing a few questions that I just recently answered, so I'm skipping past them. But let's see. Joas says, if you can respond by typing, that would help. Okay, I just saw that we are a big fan and would like to buy. When is the launch and when will it be delivered? The best, let's see. I can answer and type. So January 22nd launch, shipping soon after. Yeah. See website for more text info. Hopefully that helps. Thank you for your question. Martin says, do you know if Wingspan Asia will be translated into Danish at any time? I cannot find any information about it. We are hoping that Asmodee Nordics will do that. I believe they're doing it. It wouldn't hurt if you reached out to them and kindly said, hey, I would love to buy a Danish version of this. That can sometimes help. Spaceman also asked about the next expansion for Wingspan. I can say it's in the late design stages right now. Still needs a little bit more blind playtesting. Still needs some more of the art to be complete as well. Delivered. I can't. Yeah, hopefully my answer says that. I'm stumbling here because I think I've already answered that question by saying that it ships soon after. I can't tell you when it delivers, but I can tell you when something ships. Yeah. Yeah, that's something in general. I can't ever say exactly when something will deliver, but I can say when it will ship. Anyway, thank you for your curiosity and your interest in Finspan. I really appreciate that. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you have in the comments of this video. It'll be posted on YouTube and also on Board Game Geek on the Finspan Facebook group. Go to join that group if you'd like to. Join the World of Wingspan newsletter, and you can check out the website as well. We have information about Finspan on our website. Yeah, thank you for all your questions. Let's see, one last question here, Rohith. When is the expansion for Wingspan expected to release? Later in 2025. That's all I could say about that expansion at this time. All right, take care. Have a great Wednesday. Stay tuned for more information about Finspan coming in the next few days. Media date on the 17th, launch on January 22nd. All right, take care. Thanks.